When my daughter-in-law swapped my first-class boarding pass with her economy seat at the gate, thinking she was stealing a luxury vacation from a helpless 70-year-old woman, what Rachel didn't know was that I'd spent 35 years as a senior executive at American Airlines, coordinating corporate travel and customer relations. And this time, I was going to use every connection, every protocol, and every industry secret I'd learned to make sure she discovered that trying to scam someone who literally wrote the handbook on airline passenger rights was the most expensive mistake of her entitled life. Before we dive into how I turned my daughter-in-law's petty theft into her complete public humiliation, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story of family betrayal and airline justice resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I have another incredible story of revenge at 30,000 feet that will absolutely blow your mind. My name is Eleanor Davidson. I'm 70 years old, and I'm about to tell you how my son's wife, a woman I'd treated like my own daughter for 8 years, tried to steal my first-class seat to Paris while leaving me stranded in economy, only to discover that the confused elderly woman she thought she was manipulating was actually a retired airline industry executive who had more pull with airport staff than she could ever imagine. Let me paint you a picture of who Rachel Elizabeth Davidson really is, because understanding her true character is crucial to this story. Rachel is 34 years old, drives a leased white Tesla Model Y that costs her $920 per month in payments she can barely afford, lives in a trendy downtown loft in Chicago's River North neighborhood that consumes 70% of her and my son's combined income, and has spent the last 5 years building an Instagram lifestyle brand called Living My Best Rach that's entirely funded by credit cards, personal loans, and family money she's too proud to admit she desperately needs. Rachel works as a digital marketing consultant, a fancy title that essentially means she manages social media accounts for 3 small businesses while constantly pitching herself as an influencer to anyone who will listen. Her actual income fluctuates wildly between $1,500 and $6,000 per month, depending on whether her clients renew their contracts, but her spending habits remain consistently expensive, regardless of what she's actually earning. She tells people at networking events that she's building her personal brand and investing in experiences over things, when the reality is that she's drowning in $38,000 of credit card debt while desperately trying to maintain an image of success that exists only on her carefully curated social media feeds. Rachel's Instagram account, which has managed to accumulate 42,000 followers, through a combination of purchased bots and hashtag manipulation, showcases a lifestyle of constant luxury that would require an income of at least $200,000 annually to sustain. Her feed is filled with photos of expensive brunches at trendy restaurants, weekend getaways to boutique hotels, designer clothing hauls from Nordstrom and Saks, and motivational quotes about living your best life and deserving abundance. What her followers don't see are the maxed-out credit cards funding every posted experience, the returns to department stores after the photos are taken, and the constant anxiety about how to pay for the lifestyle that's become her full-time job to maintain. My son, David Michael Davidson, is 36 years old, works as a project coordinator at TechFlow Solutions, a software startup in downtown Chicago, and makes a respectable salary of $85,000 annually. Money that should be more than enough for a comfortable life for a couple without children. But that disappears every month into Rachel's endless pursuit of the Instagram lifestyle she believes she deserves, based on her online persona rather than their actual financial reality. David graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in business administration and initially showed promise as a focused, responsible young man who understood the value of hard work and financial planning. When he started dating Rachel in 2015, he had been steadily building his career, contributing to his 401k and saving money for a house down payment. He drove a reliable Honda Accord that he had purchased with cash, lived in a modest but comfortable apartment in Lincoln Park, and maintained a budget that allowed him to enjoy life while still planning for his future. But Rachel's influence on David's financial habits has been catastrophic. Within 6 months of their relationship becoming serious, David had traded his practical Honda for a leased BMW 3 Series that costs him $540 per month. He moved out of his affordable apartment and into Rachel's expensive loft, doubling his housing costs overnight. Most significantly, he began using his savings and retirement contributions to fund the couple's social activities and Rachel's business expenses, convincing himself that he was investing in their shared future rather than subsidizing an unsustainable lifestyle. David's transformation from a financially responsible young professional to an enabler of Rachel's spending addiction has been painful to watch as his mother. He now carries approximately $15,000 in personal credit card debt, has stopped contributing to his retirement accounts, and has no emergency savings despite earning a good salary for over a decade. When I gently suggested that their lifestyle might be unsustainable, David became defensive and insisted that Rachel's business investments would pay off eventually, and that they were simply living their lives to the fullest while they're young. The most troubling aspect of David's financial decline is that he seems to have adopted Rachel's attitude that appearance and experience are more important than actual financial security. He talks about their expensive dinners and weekend trips as investments in their relationship, and he's convinced himself that their credit card debt is good debt because it's funding experiences and business development rather than just consumption. Rachel's approach to money reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how wealth actually works. She seems to believe that looking successful and posting about luxury experiences on social media will somehow attract the income necessary to sustain those experiences legitimately. Her business model appears to be based on the assumption that if she can create enough online engagement and brand recognition, companies will eventually pay her substantial amounts of money to promote their products to her followers. But the reality of Rachel's influencer career is far different from her projections. In 3 years of active promotion, she has secured exactly 7 paid partnership deals, ranging from a $50 payment for promoting a skincare product to her largest deal worth $800 for a week-long hotel promotion. Her total influencer income over 3 years has been approximately $4,000, less than she spends in a typical month on the lifestyle content she creates for her social media accounts. Rachel's digital marketing consultant work is more stable but equally problematic from a financial planning perspective. Her 3 regular clients, a local bakery, a boutique fitness studio, and a small law firm, pay her between $400 and $800 per month each for managing their social media accounts and creating content. This provides her with a base income of $1,200 to $2,400 monthly, but the work requires no formal qualifications and offers no benefits, job security, or growth potential. The fundamental problem with Rachel's career approach is that she's focused on the appearance of entrepreneurial success rather than the substance of building a profitable business. She spends hours each day creating content for her own social media accounts, time that could be invested in developing additional clients or learning new skills that would increase her earning potential. Instead, she's trapped in a cycle where she needs to constantly document her expensive lifestyle to maintain her personal brand. But maintaining that lifestyle prevents her from having the financial resources to actually grow her business. Rachel's spending patterns reveal someone who has never learned to distinguish between wants and needs, or to delay gratification in service of long-term goals. A typical month for Rachel includes approximately $1,500 in dining and entertainment expenses, $800 in clothing and beauty purchases, $600 in subscription services and memberships, and countless smaller purchases that she justifies as business expenses or self-care investments. Her justifications for these expenditures always focus on how they contribute to her personal brand or her relationship with David, rather than acknowledging that they're consumption choices that provide no lasting value. A $300 dinner becomes a networking opportunity because she posts about it on Instagram. A $500 dress becomes a business investment because she plans to wear it to a conference. A weekend spa retreat becomes essential self-care that helps her show up authentically for her followers. This pattern of rationalization extends to every aspect of Rachel's financial decision-making. When she and David decided to lease new cars instead of buying reliable used vehicles, Rachel convinced David that luxury cars were necessary for their professional image. When they chose to live in an expensive downtown loft instead of a more affordable neighborhood, Rachel argued that their address was important for networking and business development. When they book expensive vacations they can't afford, Rachel frames them as content creation opportunities that will pay for themselves through social media engagement. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of Rachel's character is how she treats family financial support. Over the 8 years since she and David have been together, Rachel has received substantial financial assistance from both sets of parents, help that she's consistently minimized, hidden, or reframed as something other than charity. When Rachel's own parents, Robert and Patricia Walsh, helped her with credit card payments totaling $8,000 in 2019, Rachel told her social media followers that she had restructured her business finances and was excited about new growth opportunities. When David's father helped them with their security deposit and first month's rent for their current apartment, Rachel posted about manifesting their dream home and credited her success to positive thinking and hard work. Most concerning is how Rachel has begun to view my own financial assistance to David as something she's entitled to rather than generosity that should be appreciated. When I helped David with emergency car repairs last year, Rachel made comments about how nice it must be to have family support and suggested that I should consider helping them with other expenses as well. When I paid for their anniversary dinner at an expensive restaurant, Rachel posted photos of the meal on Instagram with captions about celebrating love and abundance without mentioning that the celebration was funded by David's mother. This sense of entitlement has gradually extended to assumptions about what I should be willing to fund for their lifestyle. Rachel has made increasingly direct suggestions about ways I could help them build their future, from contributing to their vacation fund to helping with Rachel's business expenses. She's also made comments about how my own modest lifestyle suggests that I must have money available to spend on family, since I don't seem to spend much on myself. Rachel's attitude toward my financial resources reveals the same fundamental misunderstanding that shapes all her financial decision-making. She assumes that because I live modestly and don't display wealth ostentatiously, I must have excess money available to support her lifestyle choices. She doesn't understand that my modest lifestyle is the result of deliberate choices about how to allocate resources, and that my financial security comes from decades of careful planning and disciplined spending rather than from having unlimited resources. What Rachel has never bothered to learn, what she's never asked about because she's too self-absorbed to show genuine interest in anyone else's life, is what my career at American Airlines actually involved for 35 years, or what kind of connections and expertise I developed during my decades in the airline industry. When Rachel introduces me to her friends at social gatherings, she typically says something like, "This is David's mom, Eleanor. She used to work for an airline before she retired," with a tone that suggests I was probably a flight attendant or gate agent, someone who worked in the service industry without any particular authority or expertise. The dismissiveness in her voice makes it clear that she sees my career as something quaint and outdated, irrelevant to her modern, technology-driven approach to business. The reality of my airline industry career was far different and far more significant than Rachel has ever bothered to investigate. For 35 years, I worked as a senior vice president of customer relations and corporate travel services at American Airlines, one of the largest and most complex organizations in the world. I was responsible for managing relationships with the airline's highest value corporate clients, coordinating travel arrangements for Fortune 500 companies, and developing the policies and procedures that governed how American Airlines handled everything from VIP passenger services to crisis management. My expertise lay in understanding the intricate systems that control airline operations, from seat allocation algorithms to upgrade prioritization protocols to the complex web of partnerships and reciprocal agreements that allow airlines to serve customers across multiple carriers and international boundaries. I knew how to navigate reservation systems that most people never see, how to access inventory that doesn't appear in public booking platforms, and how to leverage relationships with airport staff, gate agents, and customer service supervisors to solve problems that seemed impossible to resolve. Over the course of my career, I had developed what colleagues called an encyclopedia knowledge of airline policies, passenger rights, and industry regulations. I could recite the specific terms of service that governed everything from overbooking compensation to baggage liability limits. I knew which routes had flexible aircraft assignments that could accommodate last-minute seat changes, which airports had the staff and facilities to handle complex passenger rerouting, and which customer service managers had the authority to make exceptions to standard policies. More importantly, my position had required me to maintain relationships with key personnel at airports across the country and around the world. I knew the names, phone numbers, and personal preferences of gate supervisors at major hubs, customer service directors at international terminals, and operations managers who could authorize special accommodations when standard procedures weren't sufficient. These relationships weren't just professional contacts, they were friendships built on mutual respect and years of successful collaboration. My understanding of airline operations also extended to the financial and legal frameworks that govern the industry. I knew how airlines calculated the cost of passenger accommodations, how they determined compensation for service failures, and how they managed liability when travel disruptions caused significant inconvenience or financial loss for passengers. I understood the regulatory environment that controlled everything from safety protocols to accessibility requirements to international travel documentation. But perhaps most importantly, my career had taught me how to identify and respond to passenger behavior that was dishonest, manipulative, or potentially fraudulent. Airlines deal constantly with customers who attempt to game the system through false claims, documentation fraud, or aggressive tactics designed to secure upgrades, refunds, or special treatment they haven't legitimately earned. Part of my job had been developing protocols to identify these behaviors and ensure that genuinely deserving customers received appropriate service while preventing abuse of airline policies. This experience had given me what industry colleagues called radar for detecting when passengers were attempting to deceive airline staff or manipulate systems for personal advantage. I could recognize the behavioral patterns that indicated when someone was lying about their circumstances, exaggerating their complaints, or attempting to exploit airline policies through technically legal but ethically questionable means. During my final decade at American Airlines, I had also been involved in developing the customer loyalty programs and VIP services that were designed to retain the airline's most valuable customers. I understood how elite status levels were calculated, how upgrade priorities were determined, and how the airline's most exclusive services were allocated among competing requests. I knew which benefits were automatic, based on passenger status, and which required human intervention to authorize. My retirement from American Airlines in 2018 had been accompanied by recognition that was rare in the industry. I received the Chairman's Excellence Award for Lifetime Achievement in Customer Service, a recognition given to fewer than a dozen employees in the airline's history. I was also granted Lifetime Platinum Executive when my daughter-in-law swapped my first-class boarding pass with her economy seat at the gate, thinking she was stealing a luxury vacation from a helpless 70-year-old woman. What Rachel didn't know was that I'd spent 35 years as a senior executive at American Airlines, coordinating corporate travel and customer relations. And this time, I was going to use every connection, every protocol, and every industry secret I'd learned to make sure she discovered that trying to scam someone who literally wrote the handbook on airline passenger rights was the most expensive mistake of her entitled life. Before we dive into how I turned my daughter in law's petty theft into her complete public humiliation, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story of family, when I worked on consulting projects, I operated from a home office that Rachel and David assumed was just a spare bedroom where I kept old files and mementos from my career. In reality, it was equipped with direct access to airline reservation systems, secure communication equipment that allowed me to contact airline personnel at any hour, and comprehensive databases that contained everything from airport facility information to international travel requirements to passenger rights documentation for every major airline in the world. My neighbors in Winnetka knew me as a quiet, friendly retiree who kept her yard neat and participated in community activities. They had no idea that the unassuming woman next door had spent decades coordinating travel arrangements for CEOs of major corporations, or that her modest house contained more airline industry connections and expertise than most travel agencies could provide. This dual identity, the simple retiree that Rachel and David saw, and the accomplished airline industry executive that I actually was, had been deliberate. I had learned early in my career that people revealed their true character more readily when they underestimated you. Difficult passengers, in particular, became more obviously manipulative when they assumed they were dealing with someone who couldn't understand their sophisticated schemes or didn't have the authority to respond effectively. The same principle applied to family relationships. By allowing Rachel and David to see me as just another elderly relative with a modest retirement income, I had gained insight into their true values and priorities that I never would have obtained if they had understood my industry expertise and ongoing connections. Their willingness to accept my financial help while treating my advice as outdated and irrelevant revealed exactly who they were beneath their carefully constructed image of success and sophistication. Over the 8 years since Rachel had joined our family, I had watched her make increasingly poor financial decisions while refusing to acknowledge that her problems were self-created. I had seen David's transformation from a responsible young man into an enabler of Rachel's unsustainable lifestyle. Most troubling, I had observed their growing sense of entitlement about family financial support and their assumption that my resources were available to subsidize their poor choices. What had originally been occasional requests for help with genuine emergencies had evolved into regular expectations that I would contribute to their lifestyle expenses. Rachel would mention expensive activities or purchases in conversations, clearly hoping that I would offer to help fund them. David would bring up their financial stress in ways that seemed designed to elicit offers of assistance rather than to seek advice about better financial management. More concerning, Rachel had begun making comments about my travel habits and lifestyle choices that seemed designed to gather information about my resources rather than to express genuine interest in my well-being. She would ask detailed questions about my vacation plans, my travel preferences, and my decisions about when and where to spend money on experiences, rather than saving everything for the future. These conversations always made me uncomfortable because I recognized the pattern from my professional experience with passengers who were evaluating airlines as potential sources of compensation rather than as service providers they genuinely wanted to use. Rachel was beginning to evaluate me as a resource rather than as a family member deserving of respect and consideration. But I tried to convince myself that my concerns were unfounded because I couldn't imagine that David's wife, a woman I had welcomed into our family and supported through various challenges, could be developing such a calculating attitude toward my finances and my generosity. This willful blindness to the warning signs was perhaps my biggest mistake during this period. My professional training had taught me to recognize manipulative behavior and exploitation tactics, but my emotional investment in family harmony made it difficult to apply that knowledge to my own situation with Rachel and David. I wanted to believe that the love and support I had invested in their relationship had created genuine appreciation and respect that would protect me from the kind of manipulation I had seen in countless professional situations. I wanted to trust that the values I had tried to model about gratitude, integrity, and treating other people with consideration had influenced their approach to family relationships. But Rachel and David were operating according to different values. Values that prioritized their immediate comfort and social media image over loyalty, appreciation, or basic consideration for the people who had helped them. The 8 years of support and encouragement I had invested in their relationship meant nothing to them compared to the immediate convenience and luxury that my resources could provide. The stage was being set for a confrontation that Rachel and David thought they were engineering through their careful manipulation and growing demands for support. But what they didn't understand was that they weren't just making casual conversation with a naive elderly woman who happened to have some extra money available. They were revealing their intentions to someone who had spent 35 years analyzing passenger behavior, recognizing manipulation tactics, and ensuring that people who tried to abuse airline systems faced appropriate consequences. Every comment about my travel plans, every question about my financial decisions, every suggestion about how I should spend my money was being evaluated by someone who understood the difference between genuine family concern and calculated exploitation. And as their financial situation grew more desperate and their sense of entitlement more pronounced, their comments were becoming less subtle and more revealing about their true intentions regarding my resources and my generosity. The confrontation at the airport wasn't going to be the beginning of their manipulation. It was going to be the moment when they finally revealed the full extent of their character. And when I would demonstrate that underestimating someone based on age and family relationships was the most expensive mistake they could possibly make. But what Rachel and David didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined in their wildest nightmares, was that their plan to steal my first-class seat and leave me humiliated in economy would lead to their own complete social and financial destruction. While they were busy calculating how much money they could save by manipulating an elderly family member, I was quietly preparing to demonstrate that targeting a retired airline industry executive wasn't just a miscalculation. It was career suicide, social suicide, and the kind of public humiliation that would follow them for the rest of their lives. You see, when you've spent 35 years managing crisis situations for one of the world's largest airlines, you develop certain instincts about people and certain capabilities for handling problems that most people never acquire. You learn to recognize entitled behavior before it fully manifests into something destructive. You understand the importance of documentation and evidence preservation. And most critically, you never forget that the best response to people who want to take advantage of you is to ensure they face consequences so severe that they serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider similar actions. Rachel and David were about to discover that manipulating a retired airline executive wasn't just embarrassing. It was the kind of mistake that gets you permanently banned from airlines, publicly humiliated in front of hundreds of travelers, and socially destroyed in ways that would haunt their carefully curated online personas forever. They thought they were planning my minor inconvenience, but what they were actually doing was engineering their own spectacular downfall in the most public venue imaginable. The beauty of their situation was that they had no idea how thoroughly they were being monitored and how comprehensively I was documenting their behavior. Every conversation they had about helping me with travel arrangements was being recorded on equipment they didn't know existed. Every email they sent to each other about my confusion with modern booking systems was being preserved in digital files that would eventually become evidence of their systematic attempt to defraud a family member. More importantly, every financial transaction they made, every desperate attempt to fund their unsustainable lifestyle through family manipulation, was being tracked by someone who understood exactly how to document patterns of elder abuse and build comprehensive cases for legal action. I knew about their credit card debt down to the penny. I knew about their hidden expenses, their undisclosed financial commitments, and their increasingly frantic attempts to find sources of money that didn't require them to actually address their fundamental spending problems. What Rachel and David thought was a private family matter involving a confused elderly woman who needed their guidance was actually developing into a case study in family financial abuse that would be used by elder law attorneys and family counselors for years to come. They believed they were dealing with an isolated elderly relative who had no connections or resources to protect herself from their manipulation. In reality, they were targeting someone whose professional network included airline executives, travel industry attorneys, customer service directors, and media contacts who would take a very personal interest in ensuring that anyone who tried to exploit elderly travelers faced maximum consequences and maximum publicity. The irony was delicious. Rachel and David were so focused on what they imagined were the immediate benefits of manipulating my travel arrangements that they had no idea they were forfeiting their own reputations, their social standing, and their future ability to travel with dignity. They were calculating the value of a single first-class seat that they assumed I wouldn't have the sophistication to reclaim. They had no conception that their actions were actually targeting someone whose response would destroy their credibility so completely that they would spend the rest of their lives being recognized as the couple who tried to scam an elderly airline executive and got absolutely demolished for their efforts. But greed makes people stupid, and entitlement makes them reckless. Rachel and David were both greedy and entitled, which meant they were about to make mistakes that would humiliate them so completely that they would spend years wondering how they could have been so catastrophically wrong about everything. They thought they understood the risks they were taking. A little deception, a confused elderly woman, some embarrassment for me at the airport, and then a comfortable first-class flight to Paris while I struggled with the inconvenience of economy seating. What they didn't understand was that they were risking public humiliation that would be documented, shared, and remembered by thousands of people, professional consequences that would affect their careers for years, and social destruction that would make their carefully constructed online personas completely unsustainable. Because that was the other thing Rachel and David hadn't considered in their calculations. They were planning to humiliate me in one of the most public, most documented, most socially connected environments possible. Modern airports are filled with travelers who have smartphones, social media accounts, and plenty of time to document and share interesting incidents they witness. When elderly passengers are mistreated, other travelers notice, and in the age of viral videos and social justice campaigns, public sympathy for elder abuse victims can create consequences that extend far beyond the immediate incident. Rachel, in particular, had built her entire professional identity around her social media presence and her carefully curated online image. Her Living My Best Rach brand was dependent on maintaining the illusion that she was a successful, ethical, inspiring person who deserved admiration and engagement from her followers. When her attempt to steal my first-class seat was exposed and documented, her online persona wouldn't just be damaged, it would be completely destroyed in ways that would make it impossible for her to continue operating as an influencer or social media marketer. David's professional reputation was equally vulnerable to the kind of public exposure that their airport behavior would generate. His position at TechFlow Solutions required him to maintain relationships with clients and colleagues who expected a certain level of integrity and professionalism. When word spread that he had participated in defrauding his elderly mother at an airport, his professional credibility would be irreparably damaged, and his career advancement would be permanently compromised. But the most tragic aspect of Rachel and David's plan was that they weren't just destroying their own futures. They were destroying their relationship with the only family member who had consistently supported them through their financial struggles and poor decisions. Over the 8 years since Rachel had joined our family, I had provided them with tens of thousands of dollars in emergency assistance, emotional support during difficult periods, and guidance that could have helped them build genuine financial security if they had been willing to listen. This pattern of family support created a dangerous dynamic where Rachel and David began to view my assistance as something they were entitled to rather than something they should appreciate. Over time, they became increasingly comfortable asking for help and increasingly resentful when I suggested that they might need to address the underlying causes of their financial problems rather than simply treating the symptoms. My estate planning had originally included provisions for David that would have provided him with substantial financial security and opportunities to build a better life than he had been able to create through his own efforts. But as Rachel's influence over his values and priorities became more pronounced, and as their joint attitude toward my resources became more exploitative, I had begun to reconsider whether leaving them money would actually help them or simply enable more of the irresponsible behavior that was already destroying their lives. Now, their plan to humiliate and defraud me at the airport was going to provide definitive evidence about their character and their values that would make those estate planning decisions much easier. When David chose to participate in Rachel's scheme to steal my first class seat, he would be demonstrating that he valued immediate convenience and luxury more than integrity, family loyalty, or basic human decency. The consequences of that choice would extend far beyond the immediate airport incident. David would lose his inheritance, his relationship with his mother, and his standing in our extended family. More importantly, he would lose the respect and support of the person who had invested more in his success and happiness than anyone else in his life. But I wasn't going to let David and Rachel suffer for their choices any more than they had chosen to suffer. While they were planning to humiliate me at the airport, I was planning to ensure that their public exposure would be educational, memorable, and thorough enough to serve as a deterrent to other potential elder abusers who might be considering similar schemes. My response strategy had been developing for months as I watched Rachel and David's behavior become increasingly manipulative and their sense of entitlement more pronounced. The airport incident would simply be the moment when they finally revealed the full extent of their character, allowing me to respond in ways that would protect other elderly travelers from similar abuse while ensuring that Rachel and David faced consequences proportionate to their betrayal. The first component of my response plan involved documentation that would preserve every detail of their deception for legal and educational purposes. Using equipment and techniques I had learned during my airline career for handling passenger disputes and fraud investigations, I would ensure that their entire scheme was recorded in high-definition video and audio that could be used for training programs, legal proceedings, and public awareness campaigns about elder abuse. The second component involved coordinating with airport security, airline personnel, and customer service supervisors to ensure that their attempted fraud was handled according to the strictest interpretation of airline policies and federal regulations. As someone who had written many of those policies and trained the personnel who would be implementing them, I knew exactly how to ensure that Rachel and David's behavior would trigger the most serious possible response from airport authorities. The third component involved leveraging my industry connections to ensure that their actions would have long-term consequences for their ability to travel with major airlines. When passengers are flagged for attempted fraud, attempted theft, or abusive behavior toward other travelers, those incidents become part of permanent records that can affect their future booking privileges, upgrade eligibility, and treatment by airline personnel. But perhaps the most important component of my response plan involved ensuring that their behavior would be documented and shared in ways that would serve as warnings to other potential elder abusers. The airline industry takes elder abuse seriously, both because elderly travelers represent a significant portion of airline revenue and because airlines have legal and ethical obligations to protect vulnerable passengers from exploitation and mistreatment. When Rachel and David's case became public, it would serve as a demonstration that targeting elderly travelers for manipulation or fraud wasn't just morally wrong, it was professionally and socially dangerous. The consequences they would face would be severe enough to deter other family members who might be considering similar schemes, and public enough to raise awareness about the warning signs of elder abuse in travel situations. My professional network within the airline industry included journalists, bloggers, and social media influencers who specialized in travel-related content and passenger rights advocacy. When Rachel and David's story became available, it would be shared through channels that reached millions of travelers, travel agents, and industry professionals who would remember their names and their behavior for years to come. The story would also be valuable for training purposes within the airline industry. Customer service representatives, gate agents, and security personnel needed real-world examples of elder abuse tactics to help them recognize and respond to similar situations in the future. Rachel and David's case would become a textbook example of how family members could exploit elderly travelers and how airline personnel should respond to protect vulnerable passengers. But the most satisfying aspect of my response plan wasn't the professional or educational benefits. It was the poetic justice of using Rachel's own social media expertise against her. Rachel had built her entire identity around documenting her lifestyle and sharing her experiences with online audiences. When her attempt to steal my first-class seat was exposed and documented, that same online connectivity would ensure that her humiliation was witnessed, recorded, and shared by thousands of people who would remember her as the woman who tried to defraud her elderly mother-in-law at an airport. The viral nature of social media meant that Rachel's attempted fraud would follow her indefinitely. Every time she applied for a job, every time she tried to build new client relationships, every time she attempted to resurrect her influencer career, potential employers and collaborators would be able to find videos and articles documenting her attempt to steal from an elderly family member. Her online presence, which she had worked for years to build as a professional asset, would become a permanent liability that would haunt her career prospects for decades. David's professional consequences would be equally severe and equally permanent. In the corporate world, integrity and family values are considered fundamental character traits that predict employee behavior and reliability. When David's colleagues and clients learned that he had participated in defrauding his elderly mother, his professional reputation would be destroyed in ways that would make it impossible for him to advance in his current company or find comparable positions with other employers. The technology industry, in particular, places high value on ethical behavior and social responsibility. When David's attempt to steal my first-class seat became public knowledge, it would violate the core values that TechFlow Solutions and similar companies use to evaluate employee character and cultural fit. His career prospects in the industry would be permanently damaged, and his ability to maintain professional relationships would be compromised. But the most comprehensive destruction would be to Rachel and David's social standing within their peer group and extended family. Their expensive lifestyle and carefully curated social media presence had created an image of success and respectability that was entirely dependent on maintaining the illusion that they were ethical, loving, and deserving of admiration. When their attempted fraud was exposed, that illusion would be shattered so completely that they would lose not just their social credibility, but their sense of themselves as decent people. Their wealthy friends in Chicago's River North neighborhood would discover that the successful couple they had envied was actually willing to steal from elderly family members rather than address their financial problems through honest work. Rachel's networking contacts would realize that the inspiring entrepreneur they had admired was actually someone who would exploit vulnerable relatives for personal convenience. David's colleagues would learn that their trusted teammate was capable of betraying the person who had given him life and supported his dreams. This comprehensive social destruction wasn't just a side effect of their punishment, it was a necessary component of the justice they deserved. Rachel and David had been willing to humiliate and exploit me for their temporary convenience. It was appropriate that their willingness to commit elder abuse should result in the complete destruction of everything they had tried so hard to build and maintain through deception and manipulation. But the most important message that their public exposure would send wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. There were other elderly travelers in similar situations, facing family members who saw them as resources to be exploited rather than people deserving of respect and consideration. When Rachel and David's case became public, it would serve as a warning to anyone else who might be considering similar schemes. The message would be clear. Targeting elderly family members for travel fraud or any other kind of exploitation isn't just morally reprehensible, it's socially and professionally dangerous. Law enforcement agencies, airlines, and the traveling public take elder abuse seriously, and the consequences for perpetrators are severe enough to destroy their lives completely. More specifically, the case would demonstrate that underestimating elderly victims based on stereotypes about age and technical sophistication was a critical mistake. Some elderly travelers have resources, connections, and expertise that make them far more dangerous opponents than their appearance might suggest. Some elderly people have spent their careers learning exactly how to identify manipulation tactics and ensure that people who try to exploit them face maximum consequences. Rachel and David were about to become object lessons in the dangers of assuming that age equals helplessness, that modest appearances indicate limited resources, and that family relationships provide protection from the consequences of abusive behavior. They thought they were planning my humiliation and inconvenience. But what they were actually doing was choreographing their own destruction with a precision that would have been impressive if it weren't so tragic. Every decision they made, every conversation they had, every step they took toward implementing their airport scheme was moving them closer to a reckoning that would destroy everything they thought they were trying to protect. And the most beautiful part of the entire situation was that they had no idea any of this was happening. They believed they were successfully manipulating a confused, elderly woman who lacked the sophistication to recognize their deception or the resources to respond effectively. They thought they were in control, that they were implementing a clever scheme that would provide them with immediate benefits while creating no serious risks or consequences. They were wrong about everything, and they were about to discover just how catastrophically wrong they had been about the woman they thought they could humiliate without consequences. The airport confrontation they were planning would indeed be memorable, educational, and thoroughly documented, but they wouldn't be the ones documenting it for their social media followers. Instead, they would be the subjects of documentation that would follow them for the rest of their lives, serving as permanent reminders of what happens when entitled, manipulative people choose to target someone who has spent decades learning exactly how to ensure that such behavior is punished appropriately and publicly. Their plan to steal my first-class seat was going to cost them everything they had worked to build, everything they thought they deserved, and everything they had hoped to gain through their manipulation and deception. And I was going to make sure that their punishment was so comprehensive and so public that other potential elder abusers would think twice before targeting vulnerable family members for exploitation. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the consequences were about to unfold in ways that would exceed Rachel and David's worst nightmares, while providing me with the satisfaction of knowing that justice would be served completely, publicly, and permanently. To understand how completely Rachel and David had misjudged their situation, you need to understand who they really are beneath the carefully constructed facade they present to the world. Not the successful, sophisticated couple they pretend to be on social media, but the financially desperate, ethically compromised individuals who had spent years building a lifestyle entirely dependent on debt, deception, and the exploitation of family members who cared about them. Rachel Elizabeth Walsh Davidson, as she styles herself on her professional social media accounts, presents herself as a successful digital entrepreneur who has built her brand from the ground up and created her own opportunities in the influencer economy. Her LinkedIn profile describes her as a strategic digital marketing consultant specializing in authentic brand storytelling and community engagement, with expertise in content creation, social media strategy, and lifestyle brand development. The reality behind this carefully crafted professional image is far different and far more concerning. Rachel's digital marketing consultancy consists of managing social media accounts for exactly 3 small businesses in the Chicago area. Work that she secured not through her professional expertise, but through personal connections and significant underbidding of more qualified competitors. Her total client roster includes Bella's Bakery, a small neighborhood bakery owned by her former college roommate, Zenflow Studio, a boutique yoga studio where she receives free classes in exchange for social media management, and Morrison and Associates, a small law firm that hired her because she was the cheapest option available rather than because of her qualifications. Rachel's approach to managing these client accounts reveals fundamental misunderstandings about digital marketing strategy and customer engagement. For Bella's Bakery, she posts aesthetically pleasing photos of pastries and coffee drinks with generic captions about starting your day with sweetness and treating yourself to life's simple pleasures. These posts generate modest engagement from the bakery's existing customer base, but do nothing to attract new customers or drive actual sales. When the bakery owner asked Rachel to develop a strategy for increasing weekend foot traffic, Rachel suggested posting more inspirational quotes about self-care rather than creating targeted promotions or community engagement initiatives. Her work for Zenflow Studio demonstrates similar strategic confusion. Rachel's posts for the yoga studio focus primarily on aesthetic imagery, candles, crystals, and perfectly arranged yoga props, rather than on the health benefits of yoga practice or the specific classes and instructors that differentiate this studio from its competitors. When class attendance began declining despite increased social media activity, Rachel blamed algorithm changes, rather than acknowledging that her content strategy wasn't effectively communicating the studio's value proposition to potential clients. Morrison and Associates represents Rachel's most problematic client relationship because her lack of understanding about professional services marketing has actually damaged the law firm's reputation. Rachel has posted content that includes inappropriate legal advice, unauthorized client testimonials, and promotional materials that violate attorney advertising regulations. When the managing partner asked her to focus on educational content about legal processes and firm expertise, Rachel responded with posts about manifesting justice and aligning your legal needs with your personal growth journey. The fundamental problem with Rachel's approach to client work is that she treats every business as if it were her personal lifestyle brand, rather than developing customized strategies based on each client's industry, target audience, and business objectives. She consistently prioritizes aesthetic appeal over strategic effectiveness, focusing on creating content that looks good in her own portfolio rather than content that drives results for her clients.
This strategic confusion extends to Rachel's own personal brand development, which reveals even more concerning patterns of self-deception and misplaced priorities. Her Living My Best Right Instagram account, which she considers her primary professional asset, showcases a lifestyle that would require an annual income of at least $200,000 to sustain legitimately. Her feed includes regular posts from expensive restaurants where individual meals cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week, designer clothing hauls featuring items that cost more than her monthly client income, and travel content from luxury hotels and resorts that she visits using credit cards and promotional rates rather than disposable income. Rachel's content creation process reveals the elaborate deception required to maintain her lifestyle illusion. She spends hours staging photos of expensive meals, often ordering multiple dishes to create abundant-looking spreads before boxing most of the food to take home for several days of meals. She photographs herself wearing designer clothing in department stores, creating the impression that she's purchased items that she actually returns immediately after the photo session. She books one night at expensive hotels using promotional rates and credit card points, then photographs herself in luxury amenities that she presents as typical vacation experiences, rather than carefully orchestrated content creation sessions. The captions accompanying Rachel's lifestyle posts reveal sophisticated rationalization techniques that allow her to maintain the illusion that her expensive lifestyle is both legitimate and inspirational. A $300 dinner becomes investing in experiences that feed your soul and create lasting memories. A $500 dress becomes choosing quality pieces that reflect your worth and support your personal brand development. A weekend at a luxury resort becomes prioritizing self-care and mental health through transformative travel experiences. These rationalizations serve dual purposes. They allow Rachel to justify her unsustainable spending to herself, and they create content that positions her as a lifestyle coach rather than simply a consumer of luxury goods she can't afford. By framing her purchases as strategic investments in personal development and professional growth, Rachel has convinced herself that her financial irresponsibility is actually sophisticated business strategy. Rachel's engagement with her Instagram followers further demonstrates her fundamental misunderstanding of influencer economics and audience development. Despite having accumulated 42,000 followers through a combination of purchased bots, follow-for-follow schemes, and hashtag manipulation, her posts typically receive fewer than 200 genuine interactions from real users. This engagement rate of less than 0.5% indicates that her audience consists primarily of inactive accounts, bots, and users who followed her account but have no genuine interest in her content. More problematically, Rachel's audience demographics don't align with the luxury lifestyle she promotes or the premium pricing she charges for her consulting services. Analysis of her genuine followers reveals that most are college students, entry-level professionals, and other aspiring influencers who lack the disposable income to purchase the products and services she promotes. When Rachel does secure sponsored post opportunities, her conversion rates are so low that brands rarely work with her more than once. The disconnect between Rachel's lifestyle content and her audience's interests and financial capabilities has created a situation where her personal brand actually undermines her professional credibility. Potential clients who research her background often conclude that someone who spends so extravagantly on personal luxuries while charging premium rates for basic social media management must either be financially irresponsible or dishonest about her lifestyle funding sources. Rachel's approach to networking and professional relationship development reveals additional character flaws that have limited her business growth and damaged her reputation within Chicago's digital marketing community. She consistently treats networking events as opportunities to promote her personal brand rather than to learn about other professionals' needs and challenges. Her conversations focus on her recent travel experiences, her lifestyle choices, and her personal brand development rather than on potential collaborators' business objectives and how she might contribute to their success. When other marketing professionals have offered Rachel opportunities to collaborate on larger projects or refer clients to her, she has consistently prioritized short-term personal gain over long-term relationship building. She has undercut collaborators by contacting their clients directly with lower pricing. She has used networking connections to secure social media content opportunities without reciprocating professional courtesies. And she has leveraged other people's industry relationships to access events and opportunities that were not intended for her participation. This pattern of exploitative networking behavior has resulted in Rachel being gradually excluded from Chicago's digital marketing professional community. Other consultants have learned that working with Rachel involves risks that outweigh potential benefits, and her reputation for prioritizing personal gain over professional ethics has made it increasingly difficult for her to secure referrals or collaborative opportunities. Michael Davidson's transformation from a promising young professional to an enabler of Rachel's financial irresponsibility represents one of the most disappointing aspects of their relationship dynamic. When David graduated from Northwestern University in 2011 with a degree in business administration and a concentration in project management, he showed every indication of becoming a successful, responsible adult who understood the importance of financial planning and professional development. David's early career progression at TechFlow Solutions was impressive and suggested strong potential for advancement within the technology industry. He started as a junior project coordinator responsible for managing software implementation timelines and client communication for small business accounts. His attention to detail, ability to communicate complex technical concepts to non-technical clients, and skill at managing multiple project deadlines simultaneously earned him recognition from supervisors and positive feedback from clients. Within 3 years, David had been promoted to senior project coordinator with responsibility for managing larger client accounts and mentoring newer employees. His salary had increased from $42,000 to $65,000 annually, and he was on track for promotion to project manager with supervisory responsibilities and equity participation in the company. His performance reviews consistently highlighted his reliability, his collaborative approach to problem solving, and his potential for leadership roles within the organization. But David's professional trajectory began to change dramatically after he started dating Rachel in 2015. The first sign of trouble was his increasing absenteeism and distraction during work hours. David began taking extended lunch breaks to attend networking events with Rachel, using company time to help her with client projects, and spending work hours managing his personal social media accounts to support Rachel's content creation efforts. More concerning was David's changing attitude toward his work responsibilities and career advancement opportunities. Before meeting Rachel, David had been focused on developing his professional skills, building relationships with clients and colleagues, and positioning himself for promotion within TechFlow Solutions. After becoming involved with Rachel, he began viewing his job primarily as a funding source for their lifestyle, rather than as a career he wanted to develop over time. This shift in priorities became apparent when David began declining opportunities for professional development that would have enhanced his skills and advancement prospects, but would have required time and energy that he preferred to spend supporting Rachel's business development efforts. He turned down opportunities to attend industry conferences, declined invitations to join professional associations, and avoided taking on challenging projects that might have demonstrated his capabilities to senior management. Most significantly, David began making financial decisions that prioritized immediate lifestyle satisfaction over long-term financial security and career development. He stopped contributing to his 401k retirement account to free up money for Rachel's business expenses. He depleted his emergency savings to fund their expensive social activities and travel. He began using credit cards to cover basic living expenses so that his paycheck could support Rachel's lifestyle content creation and networking activities. David's transformation from a financially responsible young professional to someone willing to sacrifice his financial future for his girlfriend's lifestyle ambitions represents a fundamental change in character and values. The focused, goal-oriented young man who had graduated from Northwestern with clear career objectives and financial discipline had become someone who measured success by his ability to fund expensive experiences rather than by his professional achievements or financial security. When David and Rachel married in 2018, their wedding planning process revealed the extent to which David had adopted Rachel's approach to financial decision-making. Rather than planning a celebration that matched their actual financial resources, they borrowed money to create the kind of wedding that would photograph well for Rachel's social media content and would create the impression that they were more successful than their financial reality suggested. The wedding cost approximately $35,000, funded through a combination of family contributions, credit card debt, and personal loans. David's contribution to the wedding planning focused primarily on finding ways to finance Rachel's vision, rather than on developing a celebration that reflected their shared values or financial capabilities. He seemed more concerned with ensuring that Rachel would be satisfied with the wedding content for her social media accounts than with the long-term financial implications of their spending decisions. After their marriage, David's role in their relationship became increasingly focused on supporting Rachel's lifestyle and business ambitions rather than on developing his own career or maintaining his personal financial security. He took responsibility for managing their household expenses, which allowed Rachel to spend her client income on business development and personal brand expenses. He used his credit cards to cover their shared living expenses when Rachel's income was insufficient to maintain their lifestyle. Most problematically, he began viewing his professional responsibilities as secondary to his role as Rachel's business partner and lifestyle facilitator. This dynamic has created a situation where David's professional performance and advancement prospects have been compromised by his personal relationship priorities. His colleagues at TechFlow Solutions have noticed his decreased focus on work responsibilities, his reluctance to take on challenging projects, and his increasing tendency to prioritize personal activities over professional commitments. While he hasn't yet faced formal disciplinary action, his reputation within the company has shifted from that of a promising young professional to someone whose personal life interferes with his work performance. The most concerning aspect of David's transformation is that he seems to have lost sight of his own values and objectives, in favor of supporting Rachel's ambitions and lifestyle preferences. The young man who once set clear goals for his career advancement and financial security now measures his success primarily by his ability to fund Rachel's expensive tastes and to appear successful on her social media accounts. David's parents, particularly his mother Eleanor, have watched this transformation with growing concern and disappointment. They have seen their son change from someone who took pride in his professional achievements and financial responsibility to someone who prioritizes immediate gratification and lifestyle appearances over long-term planning and character development. The financial stress created by Rachel and David's unsustainable lifestyle has also affected their relationship with extended family members, who have become increasingly reluctant to provide financial assistance for what they recognize as self-created problems. When family members have offered practical advice about budgeting, lifestyle modification, or career development, Rachel and David have responded defensively, suggesting that their financial challenges are temporary and that their current lifestyle investments will pay off through Rachel's business growth and David's eventual promotion opportunities. This pattern of defensiveness and blame externalization has damaged Rachel and David's relationships with family members who genuinely want to help them build sustainable financial security. Rather than acknowledging that their problems stem from spending more than they earn and prioritizing lifestyle over financial planning, they consistently attribute their difficulties to external factors like economic conditions, industry changes, or insufficient family support. The most tragic aspect of Rachel and David's situation is that they possess the intelligence, education, and family support necessary to build genuine financial security and professional success. David's degree from Northwestern University and his experience at TechFlow Solutions provide him with skills and credentials that could lead to significant career advancement if he were willing to prioritize professional development over lifestyle maintenance. Rachel's social media skills and client management experience could be developed into a legitimate marketing consultancy if she were willing to focus on client results rather than personal brand development. But their commitment to maintaining their expensive lifestyle and social media image has prevented them from making the choices that would actually improve their long-term prospects. Instead of using their intelligence and advantages to build sustainable success, they have trapped themselves in a cycle where they must constantly seek external sources of funding to maintain lifestyles that their actual earnings cannot support. This cycle has made them increasingly willing to exploit family relationships and compromise their integrity in pursuit of funding sources that don't require them to address their fundamental spending problems. Their growing sense of entitlement to family financial support and their willingness to manipulate elderly relatives for personal advantage represent the logical progression of values that prioritize immediate gratification over responsibility, honesty, and respect for others. Their plan to steal my first-class airplane seat represents the culmination of years of increasingly unethical behavior, masked by sophisticated rationalizations and attractive social media presentations. They have convinced themselves that they deserve luxury experiences regardless of their ability to pay for them, and that family members who have resources should be willing to sacrifice their own comfort to support Rachel and David's lifestyle choices. But what Rachel and David haven't understood is that their beautiful social media presentations and their expensive lifestyle displays have been creating a permanent record of their values and priorities that will be used against them when their deception is finally exposed. Every post about luxury experiences they couldn't afford, every photo of expensive items purchased with borrowed money, every caption about deserving abundance while exploiting family generosity has been creating evidence of their character that will haunt them permanently when their true nature is revealed. To fully understand the desperation that drove Rachel and David to attempt stealing my first-class seat, you need to see the complete picture of their financial destruction. A carefully hidden catastrophe that makes their social media lifestyle appear not just unsustainable but actively delusional. Behind their Instagram posts about living abundantly and investing in experiences, Rachel and David have created a financial nightmare so comprehensive that bankruptcy wouldn't even provide them with a fresh start.
The scope of Rachel and David's debt crisis extends far beyond simple credit card balances or student loans. They have systematically destroyed their financial future through a combination of lifestyle inflation, predatory lending, and increasingly desperate attempts to maintain appearances that require constant infusions of borrowed money. Their total debt load, when accounting for all sources, exceeds $180,000, more than double David's annual salary, and nearly 10 times what their combined income could realistically service. Rachel's personal debt portfolio alone represents a masterclass in financial self destruction. She carries balances on 11 different credit cards, ranging from traditional bank cards to store credit accounts to high interest personal lending platforms that target consumers with poor credit scores. Her total credit card debt has reached $67,000, spread across cards with interest rates ranging from 18.9% to 29.9% annually. The minimum payments on these cards consume over $1,800 per month, more than her average monthly income from her 3 consulting clients. But Rachel's credit card debt represents only the beginning of her financial problems. She has also accumulated $23,000 in personal loans from online lending platforms that specialize in quick approvals for borrowers who don't qualify for traditional bank loans. These loans carry interest rates between 24% and 36% annually, with payment terms designed to trap borrowers in cycles of continuous debt. Rachel's monthly payments on these loans total $980, and the repayment schedules are structured so that she will pay more than $45,000 in interest over the 5-year terms if she makes only minimum payments. Rachel's relationship with money reveals fundamental misunderstandings about credit, interest, and long-term financial planning that have made her particularly vulnerable to predatory lending practices. She consistently focuses on monthly payment amounts rather than total costs, which has led her to choose financial products that minimize her immediate cash flow impact while maximizing her long-term financial destruction. When she needed $5,000 for business equipment last year, she chose a personal loan with payments of $180 per month over 4 years, rather than a bank loan with payments of $250 per month over 2 years, not understanding that the longer-term loan would cost her nearly $3,000 more in total interest. This pattern of short-term thinking has been consistently reinforced by Rachel's approach to business expenses, which she treats as investments that will eventually pay for themselves through increased income, rather than as costs that must be justified by immediate returns. She has spent over $15,000 in the past 2 years on business development expenses, including photography equipment, website design, marketing courses, networking event tickets, and business coaching programs that have produced no measurable increase in her client income or business opportunities. Rachel's most expensive business investment was $8,500 spent on a personal brand intensive program offered by a social media marketing guru who promised to help her scale to 6 figures through strategic content creation and audience development. The program consisted of online modules, group coaching calls, and access to exclusive networking opportunities that Rachel believed would transform her Instagram account into a major income source. After completing the program, Rachel's follower count increased by approximately 2,000 accounts, most of which appear to be bots. Her engagement rates remained unchanged, and she secured exactly 1 paid partnership opportunity worth $150. When I asked Rachel about the return on investment for this expensive program, she explained that the benefits were building foundation for long-term growth, and that she was playing the long game rather than expecting immediate results. This rationalization reveals Rachel's fundamental confusion about business investment principles. Legitimate business expenses should produce measurable results within reasonable timeframes, not require faith-based assumptions about future payoffs that may never materialize. Rachel's approach to business expense management also demonstrates concerning patterns of self-deception and rationalization that extend to every aspect of her financial decision-making. She has convinced herself that nearly every personal purchase can be justified as a business expense if it potentially contributes to her content creation or professional image. Her expensive clothing purchases become wardrobe investments for client meetings and content creation. Her luxury travel experiences become market research for lifestyle content development. Her spa treatments and beauty services become self-care investments that help her show up authentically for her audience. These rationalizations allow Rachel to maintain the illusion that her spending is strategic and professional rather than personal and impulsive. But the financial records tell a different story. Rachel's legitimate business expenses, office supplies, software subscriptions, professional development, account for less than 15% of the purchases she claims as business investments on her tax returns. The remaining 85% consists of lifestyle expenses that provide no measurable business benefit and often violate IRS guidelines for business expense deductions. David's financial situation is somewhat less chaotic than Rachel's, but equally unsustainable given his income and career prospects. He carries approximately $28,000 in credit card debt across 7 cards, most of which was accumulated during the 3 years since his marriage to Rachel. Before their relationship, David had maintained a single credit card with a $3,000 limit that he used for occasional purchases and paid off completely each month. His current debt load represents a nearly tenfold increase in his credit utilization, driven primarily by his attempts to fund Rachel's lifestyle and business expenses. David's most concerning debt category consists of $18,000 in cash advances and balance transfers that he has used to provide Rachel with money for her business development and personal expenses. These transactions carry the highest interest rates available on his credit cards, typically 29.9% annually, and begin accruing interest immediately without any grace period. David's monthly interest charges on these cash advances alone exceed $400, money that provides him with no benefit while preventing him from making meaningful progress toward debt reduction. The psychology behind David's willingness to accumulate high-interest debt to fund Rachel's expenses reveals troubling patterns of codependency and financial enabling that have compromised his own financial security. David seems to have convinced himself that supporting Rachel's business development is an investment in their shared future, rather than recognizing that he is subsidizing consumption that provides no returns. When Rachel needs money for a business course, networking event, or content creation expense, David provides it immediately, without requiring any analysis of potential returns or accountability for results. This dynamic has created a situation where David's financial resources are being depleted to fund Rachel's financial irresponsibility, while Rachel faces no consequences for her poor business decisions because David always provides backup funding when her choices don't produce expected results. Rather than forcing Rachel to acknowledge that her business model is unsustainable, David's financial support enables her to continue making expensive mistakes while avoiding the reality that her approach to business development is fundamentally flawed. David's student loan debt adds another $31,000 to their total financial obligations, representing the only category of debt that was accumulated for legitimate purposes and that provides potential for reasonable repayment terms. However, David's management of his student loans reveals the same short-term thinking that characterizes his approach to credit card debt. Rather than prioritizing these lower-interest loans for accelerated repayment, David has consistently chosen income-driven repayment plans that minimize his monthly payments while maximizing his total interest costs over the life of the loans. David's current student loan payments are $280 per month under an income-driven repayment plan, but this payment amount covers only a portion of the interest that accrues monthly on his balances. As a result, David's student loan balances are actually increasing each month despite his regular payments, creating a situation where he will owe more money 5 years from now than he owes today, unless he significantly increases his payment amounts or qualifies for loan forgiveness programs. The combination of Rachel and David's individual debts has created household financial obligations that are mathematically impossible to service with their current income levels. Their total monthly debt payments exceed $3,400, while their combined take-home income averages approximately $5,200 per month. After accounting for their basic living expenses, rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, and insurance, they have negative cash flow of approximately $800 monthly, a deficit that they cover through additional borrowing and family financial assistance. This negative cash flow situation means that Rachel and David are not simply living beyond their means. They are trapped in a cycle where their financial situation deteriorates every month, regardless of their income or spending behavior. Even if they eliminated all discretionary spending and focused exclusively on debt repayment, their current income would be insufficient to service their existing obligations while covering basic living expenses. The mathematical impossibility of their financial situation has forced Rachel and David to become increasingly creative and increasingly desperate in their search for funding sources that don't require them to acknowledge the fundamental unsustainability of their lifestyle. They have exhausted traditional lending options, maxed out their credit card limits, and depleted their family members' willingness to provide ongoing financial assistance. Rachel's most recent funding strategy has involved what she calls strategic partnerships with other Instagram influencers and content creators who agree to share expenses for luxury experiences in exchange for cross-promotion and content collaboration. In practice, this means that Rachel convinces other financially struggling social media users to split the costs of expensive hotel stays, restaurant meals, and entertainment activities that none of them can individually afford. These partnerships typically involve Rachel identifying influencers with larger follower counts than her own, then proposing collaboration opportunities that require shared expenses but provide her with access to audiences and experiences beyond her individual budget. She has convinced other content creators to split costs for weekend trips to expensive resorts, group dinners at high-end restaurants, and VIP tickets to exclusive events, always framing these arrangements as business development opportunities rather than cost-sharing agreements among people who can't afford luxury experiences individually. The fundamental problem with Rachel's partnership strategy is that it requires her to continuously recruit new collaborators, since most people who participate in these arrangements quickly realize that the costs exceed the benefits and that Rachel's audience engagement doesn't provide meaningful business value for their investments. As a result, Rachel spends significant time and energy maintaining relationships with other financially struggling content creators, rather than focusing on legitimate business development that could actually improve her income prospects. David has developed his own set of funding strategies that are equally problematic and equally unsustainable. His primary approach involves leveraging his professional relationships and family connections to secure loans, favors, and opportunities that provide short-term financial relief without addressing underlying problems. David has borrowed money from colleagues at work, convinced family members to co-sign for loans and credit cards, and used his professional reputation to secure payment delays and favorable terms from vendors and service providers. David's workplace borrowing has created particularly concerning complications for his professional standing and advancement prospects. He has borrowed money from 3 different colleagues, ranging from $500 to $2,000, ostensibly for emergency expenses, but actually to cover lifestyle costs and Rachel's business expenses. While David has made efforts to repay these loans, his repayment schedules have been inconsistent, and his explanations for needing the money have been vague and unconvincing. More problematically, David's financial difficulties have begun affecting his work performance and professional relationships in ways that could jeopardize his employment security. He has been late with important project deliverables because he was distracted by financial stress and debt collection calls. He has missed networking opportunities and professional development events because he couldn't afford associated costs. Most concerning, he has begun using company resources, including time during work hours and company communication systems, to manage his personal financial crisis and to support Rachel's business development efforts. The combination of Rachel and David's increasingly desperate funding strategies has created a situation where their financial problems are beginning to affect other people who trusted them with money, professional opportunities, and personal relationships. Family members who provided financial assistance are beginning to realize that their help enabled continued irresponsible behavior rather than providing temporary relief during a difficult period. Professional colleagues who lent money or provided opportunities are beginning to question David's judgment and reliability. Rachel and David's approach to family financial relationships reveals particularly troubling patterns of manipulation and exploitation that have escalated as their financial situation has become more desperate. They have systematically approached different family members with requests for financial assistance, carefully tailoring their appeals to each person's emotional vulnerabilities and financial capabilities. With David's parents, Rachel and David emphasize their professional ambitions and their need for investment capital to build Rachel's business and advance David's career. They present their financial requests as temporary assistance that will help them achieve independence and success, rather than acknowledging that they need ongoing subsidies to maintain an unsustainable lifestyle. With Rachel's parents, they focus on emotional appeals about their relationship and their desire to build a stable foundation for their future together. Rachel presents their financial difficulties as temporary challenges that could be easily resolved with family support, and she emphasizes how grateful she is for her parents' willingness to help their children achieve their dreams. With extended family members and family friends, Rachel and David present themselves as responsible young professionals who have encountered unexpected financial challenges due to economic conditions or industry changes beyond their control. They carefully avoid mentioning their lifestyle expenses or discretionary spending, instead focusing on basic needs and legitimate business expenses that seem reasonable and worthy of support. This systematic approach to family financial manipulation has allowed Rachel and David to secure assistance from multiple sources without any individual family member understanding the full scope of their financial irresponsibility. Each person who provides help believes they are contributing to a temporary solution for specific problems, rather than understanding that they are subsidizing an ongoing lifestyle that requires continuous external funding. The most concerning aspect of Rachel and David's family financial strategy is that they have begun targeting elderly relatives who may be particularly vulnerable to emotional manipulation and who may have limited ability to verify the accuracy of financial information or to understand the implications of providing ongoing assistance. Their growing focus on my travel arrangements and lifestyle choices represents the latest evolution of their systematic approach to identifying and exploiting family members who might have resources available to support their financial needs. Their plan to steal my first-class airplane seat represents not just an isolated incident of travel fraud, but the culmination of years of increasingly aggressive attempts to extract value from family relationships while providing nothing in return. They have calculated that my first-class seat represents approximately $3,000 in value that they can capture for their own use, while leaving me with accommodations that they consider adequate for someone of my age and perceived financial limitations. But Rachel and David's focus on the immediate value of my airplane seat reveals their fundamental misunderstanding of both my financial resources and my professional capabilities. They have assumed that someone who lives modestly and travels infrequently must have limited resources and limited ability to respond to their manipulation. They have no conception that their attempted theft is targeting someone whose response will cost them far more than the value of the seat they think they're stealing. Their financial desperation has made them reckless in ways that will amplify the consequences of their actions far beyond anything they could have anticipated. When their attempted fraud is exposed, it won't just cost them the immediate benefits they hope to gain. It will destroy their ability to maintain the lifestyle and the social media presence that requires constant funding from external sources. The comprehensive financial destruction that will result from their airport behavior will serve as a fitting conclusion to years of financial irresponsibility, family exploitation, and professional misconduct that they have managed to hide behind sophisticated social media presentations and careful manipulation of family relationships. What Rachel and David never bothered to investigate, what they never asked about because they were too self-absorbed to show genuine interest in anyone else's life, was what my career at American Airlines actually involved for 35 years, or what kind of connections, expertise, and industry influence I had developed during my decades as one of the most senior executives in the global aviation industry. When Rachel introduces me to her Instagram followers during family gatherings, she typically posts photos with captions like Sunday dinner with David's sweet mom, who used to work for an airline, had family time, grateful, with a tone that suggests I was probably a flight attendant or customer service representative, someone who worked in the service industry without any particular authority, expertise, or ongoing influence. The dismissiveness in her social media presentation makes it clear that she sees my career as something quaint and outdated, irrelevant to her modern, technology driven approach to business and life. The reality of my airline industry career was far different and far more significant than Rachel and David have ever bothered to investigate. For 35 years, I held the position of Senior Vice President of Global Customer Relations and Corporate Travel Services at American Airlines, one of the most complex and influential roles in the entire aviation industry. I was responsible for managing relationships with American Airlines' highest value corporate clients, overseeing VIP passenger services for celebrities and government officials, and developing the policies and procedures that governed how the world's largest airline handled everything from elite passenger accommodations to international crisis management. My expertise encompassed every aspect of airline operations that touched passenger experience, from seat allocation algorithms that determined upgrade priorities to the complex web of international partnerships that allowed American Airlines passengers to travel seamlessly across multiple carriers and global destinations. I knew how to navigate reservation systems that most airline employees never see, how to access inventory that doesn't appear in public booking platforms, and how to leverage relationships with airport staff, gate agents, and operations managers to solve problems that seemed impossible to resolve through normal channels. During my tenure at American Airlines, I had been responsible for managing travel arrangements for Fortune 500 CEOs, heads of state, Hollywood celebrities, and other high-profile individuals whose travel requirements went far beyond standard passenger services. This work required me to understand not just airline policies and procedures, but also international protocol, security considerations, and crisis management techniques that were essential when dealing with passengers whose travel disruptions could have significant political, financial, or public relations consequences. My office at American Airlines headquarters in Fort Worth had been equipped with direct communication lines to airport operations centers around the world, secure systems that allowed me to monitor flight status and passenger manifests in real time, and priority access to senior management personnel who could authorize special accommodations when standard procedures weren't sufficient to meet passenger needs. When a Fortune 500 CEO was stranded due to weather delays, when a government official needed urgent rerouting for security reasons, or when a celebrity required discretionary accommodations to avoid media attention, I was the person who made those arrangements happen. Over the course of my career, I had developed what industry colleagues called an encyclopedic knowledge of airline policies, passenger rights, and international travel regulations. I could recite the specific terms of service that governed everything from overbooking compensation to baggage liability limits for every major airline in the world. I knew which routes had flexible aircraft assignments that could accommodate last-minute passenger changes, which airports had the staff and facilities to handle complex passenger rerouting, and which customer service managers had the authority to make exceptions to standard policies. More importantly, my position had required me to maintain personal relationships with key personnel at airports and airlines across 6 continents. I knew the names, direct phone numbers, and personal preferences of operations managers at major international hubs, customer service directors at busy domestic terminals, and government liaison officers who facilitated travel for diplomatic and military personnel. These relationships weren't just professional contacts maintained through industry conferences. They were friendships built on mutual respect and decades of successful collaboration. My understanding of airline operations also extended to the financial and legal frameworks that govern the industry's treatment of passengers. I knew how airlines calculated the cost of passenger accommodations, how they determined compensation for service failures, and how they managed liability when travel disruptions caused significant inconvenience or financial loss for passengers. I understood the regulatory environment that controlled everything from safety protocols to accessibility requirements to the complex international treaties that governed aviation across different countries and legal jurisdictions. But perhaps most importantly, for my current situation with Rachel and David, my career had taught me how to identify and respond to passenger behavior that was dishonest, manipulative, or potentially fraudulent. Airlines deal constantly with customers who attempt to game the system through false claims, documentation fraud, or aggressive tactics designed to secure upgrades, refunds, or special treatment they haven't legitimately earned. Part of my job had been developing protocols to identify these behaviors and ensure that genuinely deserving passengers received appropriate service while preventing abuse of airline policies and procedures. This experience had given me what industry colleagues called radar for detecting when passengers were attempting to deceive airline staff or manipulate systems for personal advantage. I could recognize the behavioral patterns that indicated when someone was lying about their circumstances, exaggerating their complaints, or attempting to exploit airline policies through technically legal but ethically questionable means. I had seen every type of travel-related fraud, manipulation, and exploitation attempt that creative passengers could devise, and I had developed comprehensive strategies for responding to each category of deceptive behavior. During my final decade at American Airlines, I had also been heavily involved in developing the customer loyalty programs and VIP services that were designed to retain the airline's most valuable passengers while preventing abuse by customers who attempted to gain elite status or premium services through fraudulent means. I understood how elite status levels were calculated, how upgrade priorities were determined, and how the airline's most exclusive services were allocated among competing requests from passengers who claimed to deserve special treatment. My expertise in customer loyalty management had made me particularly valuable during the development of American Airlines' A-Advantage program, which became the model for frequent flyer programs throughout the aviation industry. I had been responsible for designing the policies that determined how elite status was earned and maintained, how upgrade certificates were distributed and used, and how the airline balanced the competing demands of providing excellent service to high-value customers while maintaining profitability and operational efficiency. This work had required me to understand not just the technical aspects of airline operations, but also the psychology of customer behavior and the economic principles that governed passenger value and airline profitability. I learned how to analyze passenger spending patterns to identify customers who generated significant revenue despite not having obvious elite status indicators, and how to recognize customers who appeared valuable based on their status levels but actually generated minimal profit for the airline. My retirement from American Airlines in 2018 had been accompanied by recognition that was unprecedented in the industry's history. I received the Chairman's Lifetime Achievement Award for excellence in customer service and industry leadership, a recognition that had been given to fewer than a dozen employees in American Airlines' 90-year history. The award ceremony was attended by senior executives from competing airlines, government officials who regulated the aviation industry, and travel industry leaders who had worked with me on complex international projects. More significantly, I was granted lifetime executive platinum status with American Airlines, along with reciprocal elite status recognition on every major airline worldwide through the comprehensive partnership agreements that I had helped negotiate during my career. This status provided me with access to services and accommodations that were available to fewer than 10,000 people globally, including guaranteed first-class upgrades, access to exclusive lounges and facilities, and priority customer service that could resolve travel problems that would be impossible for ordinary passengers to address.
But the most valuable aspect of my retirement package was the consulting contract that American Airlines had offered me to continue working on special projects and complex customer service issues that required my expertise and industry relationships. This consulting arrangement kept me connected to current industry practices, maintained my access to airline reservation and operation systems, and preserved my relationships with personnel who could resolve travel problems that were beyond the scope of standard customer service procedures. When I worked on consulting projects, I operated from a home office that Rachel and David assumed was just a spare bedroom where I kept old files and memorabilia from my airline career. In reality, it was equipped with secure communication systems that allowed me to contact airline personnel at any hour, direct access to reservation systems that most travel agents couldn't access, and comprehensive databases that contained everything from airport facility information to international travel requirements to passenger rights documentation for every major airline and airport in the world. My consulting work primarily involved three categories of projects that kept me actively engaged with the airline industry and maintained my professional relationships and expertise. First, I provided crisis management services for high-profile passengers who encountered complex travel problems that required immediate resolution and discretionary accommodations. When a Fortune 500 CEO was stranded due to mechanical problems or weather delays, when a government official needed emergency rerouting for security reasons, or when a celebrity required special handling to avoid unwanted attention, airlines would contact me to coordinate solutions that weren't available through normal customer service channels. Second, I served as an expert witness and consultant for legal cases involving airline passenger rights, service failures, and operational disputes. My comprehensive knowledge of industry policies and regulations made me valuable to attorneys who were handling cases involving passenger compensation, accessibility accommodations, or international travel disputes that required expert testimony about airline procedures and passenger entitlements. Third, I provided strategic consulting services to other airlines, travel agencies, and corporate travel departments that needed guidance on complex travel arrangements, passenger service protocols, or relationship management with airline partners. My industry relationships and expertise made me particularly valuable for organizations that needed to coordinate travel for high-profile individuals or groups with special requirements that went beyond standard travel services. These consulting relationships generated significant income, typically between $100,000 and $150,000 annually, while keeping me actively engaged with industry developments and maintaining my professional network. But more importantly, they preserved my access to systems, personnel, and services that would be crucial for responding to any attempts to defraud or manipulate me in travel-related situations. My neighbors in Winnetka knew me as a quiet, friendly retiree who kept her yard neat, participated in community activities, and occasionally traveled to visit family or friends. They had no idea that the unassuming woman next door had coordinated travel arrangements for heads of state, managed crisis situations that affected thousands of passengers, or that her modest house contained more airline industry connections and expertise than the largest travel agencies could provide. This dual identity, the simple retiree that Rachel and David saw, and the accomplished airline industry executive that I actually was, had been deliberate and strategic. I had learned early in my career that people revealed their true character more readily when they underestimated you. Difficult passengers in particular became more obviously manipulative when they assumed they were dealing with someone who couldn't understand their sophisticated schemes or didn't have the authority to respond effectively. The same principle applied to family relationships, and I had found it particularly useful for understanding Rachel and David's true values and priorities. By allowing them to see me as just another elderly relative with a modest retirement income and limited understanding of modern business and technology, I had gained insight into their character that I never would have obtained if they had understood my industry expertise and ongoing influence. Their willingness to dismiss my career as irrelevant, to ignore my advice about financial planning and professional development, and to treat my resources as available for their exploitation revealed exactly who they were beneath their carefully constructed image of success and sophistication. If they had known about my industry connections and expertise, they would have modified their behavior around me while continuing to exploit other family members who appeared more vulnerable. Over the 8 years since Rachel had joined our family, I had watched her make increasingly poor financial decisions while dismissing my suggestions about sustainable business development and responsible spending. I had seen David's transformation from a responsible young man into an enabler of Rachel's unsustainable lifestyle. Most troubling, I had observed their growing sense of entitlement about family financial support, and their assumption that my resources were available to subsidize their poor choices without any accountability or appreciation. What had originally been occasional requests for help with genuine emergencies had evolved into regular expectations that I would contribute to their lifestyle expenses and business development costs. Rachel would mention expensive activities or purchases in conversations, clearly hoping that I would offer to help fund them. David would bring up their financial stress in ways that seemed designed to elicit offers of assistance, rather than to seek advice about better financial management. More concerning, Rachel had begun making comments about my travel habits and lifestyle choices that seemed designed to gather information about my resources and decision-making processes, rather than to express genuine interest in my well-being. She would ask detailed questions about my vacation plans, my travel preferences, and my decisions about when and where to spend money on experiences, rather than saving everything for the future. These conversations always made me uncomfortable, because I recognized the pattern from my professional experience with passengers who were evaluating airlines as potential sources of compensation, rather than as service providers they genuinely wanted to use. Rachel was beginning to evaluate me as a resource rather than as a family member deserving of respect and consideration, and her questions were becoming increasingly focused on understanding how she might exploit my perceived vulnerabilities for her financial benefit. But I tried to convince myself that my concerns were unfounded because I couldn't imagine that David's wife, a woman I had welcomed into our family and supported through various challenges, could be developing such a calculating attitude toward my finances and my generosity. My emotional investment in family harmony made it difficult to apply my professional knowledge about manipulation tactics to my own family situation. I wanted to believe that the love and support I had invested in Rachel and David's relationship had created genuine appreciation and respect that would protect me from the kind of exploitation I had seen in countless professional situations. I wanted to trust that the values I had tried to model about gratitude, integrity, and treating other people with consideration had influenced their approach to family relationships. But Rachel and David were operating according to different values that prioritized their immediate comfort and social media image over loyalty, appreciation, or basic consideration for the people who had helped them. The 8 years of support and encouragement I had invested in their relationship meant nothing to them compared to the immediate convenience and luxury that my resources could provide. The stage was being set for a confrontation that Rachel and David thought they were engineering through their careful manipulation and growing demands for support. But what they didn't understand was that they weren't just making casual conversation with a naive elderly woman who happened to have some extra money available for travel expenses. They were revealing their intentions to someone who had spent 35 years analyzing passenger behavior, recognizing manipulation tactics, and ensuring that people who tried to abuse airline systems faced comprehensive consequences that served as deterrents to future misconduct. Every comment about my travel plans, every question about my financial decisions, every suggestion about how I should modify my lifestyle to better accommodate their needs was being evaluated by someone who understood the difference between genuine family concern and calculated exploitation. And as their financial situation grew more desperate, and their sense of entitlement more pronounced, their comments were becoming less subtle and more revealing about their true intentions regarding my resources and my travel arrangements. Their plan to steal my first-class airplane seat wasn't going to be the beginning of their manipulation. It was going to be the moment when they finally revealed the full extent of their character, and when I would demonstrate that underestimating someone based on age, appearance, and family relationships was the most expensive mistake they could possibly make. The airport confrontation they were planning would indeed involve sophisticated manipulation, careful coordination, and detailed knowledge of airline procedures and passenger psychology. But they wouldn't be the ones demonstrating that expertise. Instead, they would be the subjects of a masterclass in airline industry crisis management, passenger protection protocols, and the comprehensive consequences that await passengers who attempt to defraud fellow travelers, particularly when those fellow travelers happen to be among the most connected and influential people in the entire aviation industry. Their attempt to steal my first-class seat was going to provide me with the perfect opportunity to demonstrate exactly why my colleagues had spent decades seeking my advice on handling difficult passengers, and why airlines around the world had trusted me to resolve problems that seemed impossible to solve through normal procedures. Rachel and David were about to discover that targeting a retired airline executive wasn't just embarrassing, it was the kind of mistake that would follow them for the rest of their lives, affecting their ability to travel, their professional reputations, and their social standing in ways that would make their current financial problems seem trivial by comparison. The moment of truth arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning in October 2023, when Rachel and David's carefully orchestrated plan to steal my first-class seat to Paris collided with 35 years of airline industry expertise, connections, and crisis management experience that they never could have imagined. What they thought would be a simple manipulation of a confused elderly woman became instead the most spectacular public humiliation in Chicago O'Hare International Airport's history, and the beginning of consequences that would destroy their lives so completely that they would spend years wondering how they could have been so catastrophically wrong about everything. The setup for their scheme had been developing for months, as Rachel and David became increasingly bold in their hints about my upcoming trip to Paris and their suggestions that I might need help managing such a complex international travel arrangement. They had convinced themselves that someone of my age and apparent technical limitations would be overwhelmed by modern airline booking systems and would welcome their assistance with everything from seat selection to baggage handling. Their plan was sophisticated in its manipulation and breathtaking in its audacity. David had volunteered to drive me to the airport, ostensibly to help with my luggage and ensure that I didn't encounter any problems with check-in procedures. Rachel had arranged to meet us at the airport, claiming that she wanted to say goodbye and make sure I had everything I needed for a comfortable flight. Together, they would create a situation where I would be grateful for their help and dependent on their guidance, making it easy for them to correct what they would present as a booking error that had placed me in first class when I had obviously intended to purchase economy seating. The morning of my departure, David arrived at my house in Winnetka at precisely 7 a.m., appearing helpful and concerned as he loaded my luggage into his car and reviewed my travel documents to ensure everything was properly organized. His performance was flawless, the caring son making sure his elderly mother was prepared for international travel. "Mom, I want to double-check your boarding pass and make sure everything looks correct," David said as we drove toward O'Hare. Sometimes airlines make mistakes with seat assignments, especially for older passengers who might not be familiar with their computer systems. I handed him my boarding pass, Seat 2A, First Class, on American Airlines Flight 144 to Paris Charles de Gaulle, and watched as he studied it with what appeared to be genuine concern, but was actually careful preparation for the fraud he was planning to commit. "This doesn't look right," David said with convincing puzzlement. "Mom, did you really mean to book first class? That seems like a lot of extra money for just a longer flight. Are you sure this is what you wanted?" His performance was so polished that someone who didn't understand his true motives might have believed he was genuinely looking out for my financial interests. But I recognized the setup immediately. He was creating the narrative that would justify their theft by suggesting that my first-class booking had been a mistake that needed to be corrected. Rachel was waiting for us at the departure terminal, positioned near the American Airlines check-in counter with her phone ready to document what she planned to present as a heartwarming story about helping David's confused mother navigate modern air travel. Her Instagram account was already prepared with a draft post about, quote, helping family with travel challenges, and the importance of looking out for our elderly relatives. "Eleanor, I'm so glad we're here to help you with this," Rachel said with perfect concern as she hugged me goodbye. "International travel can be so confusing these days, especially with all the different seat options and upgrade possibilities." Together, Rachel and David approached the check-in counter with me, presenting themselves as helpful family members who needed to resolve what they described as a seating error that was causing confusion for their elderly relative. The American Airlines customer service representative, a young woman named Jennifer Chen, who clearly didn't recognize the significance of my boarding pass or my identity, listened politely as David explained the situation. "We're concerned that there might have been some kind of mistake with my mother's seat assignment," David said, with perfect sincerity. "She booked economy seating for her trip to Paris, but somehow she received a first-class boarding pass. We don't want her to be embarrassed when she gets to the gate and discovers that she doesn't actually have a first-class seat. Rachel nodded in agreement, adding, quote, "We just want to make sure she has a comfortable flight in the seat she actually purchased. Sometimes airlines accidentally issue boarding passes for the wrong cabin, and we don't want Eleanor to be surprised or upset when she tries to board." Ms. Chen examined my boarding pass and began typing on her computer to access my reservation details. What she found in the system should have immediately alerted her that this was not a routine seating correction, but rather an attempt to defraud one of American Airlines' most elite passengers. Unfortunately, her training apparently hadn't prepared her to recognize the warning signs of family financial abuse, or to understand the significance of the passenger codes and status indicators that were displayed in my reservation. "I can certainly check on this for you," Ms. Chen said helpfully. "Let me look at the reservation details and see what seating was originally purchased." While Ms. Chen worked at her computer, Rachel and David exchanged glances that they thought were subtle but that I recognized as coordination signals. They were preparing to complete their theft by providing Ms. Chen with alternative seating preferences that would move me to economy, while allowing them to claim my first-class seat for their own use. But what Rachel and David didn't know was that their entire performance was being recorded by airport security cameras that I had specifically requested to monitor this interaction, and that Ms. Chen's computer system was about to display information that would immediately expose their attempted fraud to anyone with basic airline industry knowledge. "This is interesting," Ms. Chen said with growing confusion as she studied my reservation details. "Mrs. Davidson, it shows here that you have executive platinum status with American Airlines, and your reservation was booked using upgrade certificates that are only available to our highest-tier frequent flyers. It also shows that you have a consulting contract with American Airlines that provides you with guaranteed first-class accommodations on all domestic and international flights." The expression on Rachel and David's faces was priceless as they realized that their careful planning had just encountered information that completely contradicted their narrative about my confusion and their helpful assistance. They had expected to deal with a standard customer service interaction involving an elderly passenger who needed help understanding airline procedures. Instead, they were being confronted with evidence that I was among American Airlines' most valued and sophisticated customers. "There must be some mistake," David said quickly, his voice betraying the first signs of panic. "My mother is retired and lives very modestly. She wouldn't have executive platinum status or consulting contracts. Someone must have mixed up her reservation with another passenger." But Ms. Chen was now looking at me with recognition and growing alarm as she understood that the family members who claimed to be helping me were actually attempting to defraud someone whose industry status made their behavior a serious criminal matter, rather than a simple misunderstanding. "Mrs. Davidson," Ms. Chen said carefully, "are you Eleanor Davidson, the former Senior Vice President of Customer Relations for American Airlines?" "Yes, I am," I replied with the calm authority that had served me well in countless crisis situations during my airline career. "And I believe these two individuals are attempting to steal my first-class seat through fraudulent misrepresentation of my booking intentions and mental capacity." The moment those words left my mouth, the entire dynamic of the situation changed dramatically. Ms. Chen immediately understood that she was witnessing attempted elder fraud against one of the most senior and respected executives in American Airlines history. Rachel and David realized that their carefully planned scheme had just been exposed in the most public and damaging way possible. "I'm calling airport security immediately," Ms. Chen announced as she reached for her phone. "And I'm notifying American Airlines management that we have an attempted fraud situation involving a member of our executive leadership team." Rachel's response revealed the depth of her self-deception and her complete failure to understand the seriousness of what they had attempted. "This is ridiculous," she said with indignant anger. "We're just trying to help David's mother avoid embarrassment. There's no fraud here, just a confused elderly woman who made a mistake with her booking." But David's response showed that he was beginning to understand the catastrophic nature of their situation. His face had gone pale and his voice was shaking as he tried to salvage their position. "Mom, please, you're misunderstanding what we were trying to do. We just wanted to make sure you were comfortable and that everything was correct with your reservation." By this point, other passengers in the terminal had begun to notice the commotion, and several people were openly staring at the situation unfolding at the American Airlines counter. Rachel, with her instinctive social media awareness, realized that their confrontation was becoming a public spectacle that could be documented and shared online, potentially destroying the carefully curated image she had spent years building. "Can we please handle this privately?" Rachel asked Ms. Chen with growing desperation. "This is a family matter, and we don't need to involve security or make a scene in front of other passengers." But Ms. Chen was now operating according to American Airlines protocols for handling fraud attempts against VIP passengers, procedures that I had helped develop during my tenure with the company. These protocols required immediate security notification, management involvement, and comprehensive documentation of any attempts to defraud passengers with elite status or industry connections. Within minutes, airport security officers arrived at the American Airlines counter, followed by the terminal manager and American Airlines senior customer service supervisor for O'Hare operations. The customer service supervisor, a man named Marcus Rodriguez who had worked with me on several complex passenger service issues during my consulting career, immediately recognized me and understood the severity of Rachel and David's attempted fraud. "Mrs. Davidson, I'm so sorry this happened," Mr. Rodriguez said with genuine concern and professional embarrassment. "We take any attempts to defraud our executive team members extremely seriously, and I want to assure you that this situation will be handled with the full resources of American Airlines security and legal departments." The arrival of airport security and airline management transformed Rachel and David's attempted fraud into a formal investigation that would be documented, reported, and potentially prosecuted, according to federal regulations governing airline security and passenger protection. What they had planned as a discreet family manipulation was now a matter of public record that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Airport security officer Patricia Williams began documenting the incident by reviewing the security camera footage that had captured Rachel and David's entire performance at the check-in counter. This footage clearly showed them presenting false information about my mental capacity and booking intentions, providing clear evidence of their attempted fraud that could be used in legal proceedings or airline industry training programs. "Based on what I'm seeing here," Officer Williams announced, "we have clear evidence of attempted elder fraud and airline ticket fraud. These individuals deliberately misrepresented this passenger's mental capacity and booking intentions in an attempt to steal premium seating accommodations." Rachel's reaction to this formal fraud accusation revealed her complete failure to understand the legal implications of their behavior. "This is insane," she protested loudly. "We're David's family. We were just trying to help his mother. This isn't fraud. It's a misunderstanding." But David was beginning to grasp the professional and legal consequences they were facing. "Officer Williams, please, I think there's been a serious miscommunication here. My mother has every right to her first-class seat, and we never intended to suggest otherwise. We were just concerned about her comfort and wanted to make sure everything was correct with her reservation." Officer Williams reviewed the security footage again, focusing on the specific statements that Rachel and David had made to Ms. Chen about my alleged confusion and their claims that I had mistakenly booked first-class seating. The footage clearly contradicted David's revised explanation and provided definitive evidence of their fraudulent intent. The security footage shows both of you explicitly stating that Mrs. Davidson had made a booking error and that her first-class seat assignment was a mistake that needed to be corrected, Officer Williams explained. "You attempted to convince airline personnel to change her seating based on false information about her mental capacity and booking intentions. That constitutes attempted fraud under federal airline security regulations." By this point, a crowd of passengers had gathered to watch the confrontation, and several people were recording the incident on their smartphones. Rachel's worst nightmare was materializing as her attempted fraud was being documented by multiple witnesses who would likely share the videos on social media platforms, where they could be viewed by thousands of people. Mr. Rodriguez understood that the incident had evolved beyond a simple customer service issue and was now a matter that required coordination with American Airlines' legal and security departments. "Mrs. Davidson, we need to document this incident comprehensively for our records and for potential legal action. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement about what these individuals attempted to do?" "Absolutely," I replied with the professional authority that had served me well in countless crisis situations. "I want this incident thoroughly documented as an example of elder fraud techniques, and I want these individuals to face appropriate consequences for their attempted theft." Rachel's response to my formal accusation revealed the depth of her entitlement and her complete failure to understand the seriousness of their situation. "Eleanor, you're being ridiculous," she said with angry frustration. "We're family. We were trying to help you. You're making this into something it's not, because you're confused about what happened." But her attempt to continue manipulating me in front of airport security and airline management only provided additional evidence of her fraudulent intent and her pattern of exploiting elderly family members through emotional manipulation and false claims about mental capacity. Officer Williams completed her preliminary investigation and reached a conclusion that would have severe consequences for Rachel and David's future travel privileges and legal standing. Based on the evidence we've collected, I'm formally charging both individuals with attempted airline fraud and elder abuse. They will be banned from American Airlines flights pending a full investigation, and this incident will be reported to federal authorities for potential prosecution. The announcement of formal charges and a flight ban finally made Rachel and David understand the catastrophic consequences of their attempted fraud. They had risked everything for a first-class seat worth approximately $3,000, and they were now facing legal charges, travel restrictions, and public humiliation that would affect their lives indefinitely. "This is going to destroy us," David said with dawning realization. "Rachel, my career, our reputation, everything is ruined because we tried to steal my mother's airplane seat." Rachel's response showed that she still didn't fully grasp the scope of their destruction. "It's not fair," she protested. "We didn't hurt anyone. We were just trying to save some money and upgrade our travel experience. Eleanor can afford to fly economy. She doesn't need first class at her age." Quote. But her continued justification for their attempted theft only reinforced the evidence of their criminal intent and their complete lack of remorse for targeting an elderly family member for financial exploitation. Mr. Rodriguez coordinated with American Airlines Media Relations Department to ensure that the incident would be used for industry training purposes and public awareness campaigns about elder fraud prevention. "Mrs. Davidson, with your permission, we'd like to use this incident as a case study for training our customer service staff to recognize elder abuse attempts. Your professional background and industry reputation make this an ideal example for educational purposes." "I absolutely agree," I replied. Rachel and David's behavior represents exactly the kind of family financial abuse that targets elderly travelers, and airline personnel need to understand how to recognize and respond to these situations. The educational value of Rachel and David's attempted fraud extended beyond airline industry training to broader public awareness about elder abuse tactics and warning signs. Their case would be featured in training materials for airport security, customer service representatives, and travel industry professionals who needed to understand how family members could exploit elderly relatives through travel-related fraud. But the most immediate consequences for Rachel and David were the travel restrictions and legal charges that would affect their ability to function professionally and socially. The American Airlines flight ban would be shared with other major carriers through industry security databases, effectively preventing them from flying on any major airline until their legal situation was resolved. More significantly, the formal fraud charges would become part of their permanent criminal records, affecting their employment prospects, professional licensing, and social standing indefinitely. David's career in technology would be severely damaged by criminal charges involving fraud and elder abuse, while Rachel's influencer career would be destroyed by public documentation of her attempt to steal from an elderly family member. The social media documentation of their airport humiliation ensured that their attempted fraud would follow them indefinitely through online searches and social network sharing. Videos of Rachel and David being confronted by airport security and charged with fraud were already being shared across multiple platforms, creating a permanent record of their behavior that would affect their personal and professional relationships for years to come. As airport security escorted Rachel and David away from the American Airlines counter, I reflected on the comprehensive justice that had been served and the broader implications of their attempted fraud for other potential elder abuse situations. Their case would serve as a powerful deterrent to family members who might consider exploiting elderly relatives, while also providing valuable training for industry personnel who needed to recognize manipulation tactics. My flight to Paris departed on schedule, and I enjoyed every moment of my first-class accommodations while knowing that Rachel and David were dealing with the legal and professional consequences of their attempted theft. The comfort and luxury they had tried to steal from me became even more satisfying knowing that their fraud had been exposed and documented for educational and legal purposes. Upon my return from Paris 2 weeks later, I learned that Rachel and David's case had become a widely shared example of airport fraud and elder abuse, featured in industry publications and training materials that reached thousands of airline and security personnel. Their attempted theft had evolved into a comprehensive educational resource that would help protect other elderly travelers from similar exploitation. The legal consequences for Rachel and David continued to unfold over the following months, as they faced federal charges for airline fraud and elder abuse that carried potential sentences of up to 5 years in prison and substantial financial penalties. Their expensive lifestyle and carefully curated social media presence had been destroyed by a single morning of attempted fraud that revealed their true character to the world. David lost his position at TechFlow Solutions when his criminal charges became public knowledge, while Rachel's influencer career was permanently destroyed by viral videos of her attempted fraud and subsequent arrest. Their downtown loft was foreclosed upon when they could no longer afford the rent, and their luxury cars were repossessed by lenders who no longer considered them creditworthy. Most importantly, their attempted fraud had permanently severed their relationship with family members who could no longer trust them around elderly relatives or family financial matters. They had sacrificed decades of family support and love for a first-class airplane seat that they never received, and consequences that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Today, 3 years after their attempted fraud, I continue to travel extensively and comfortably, often in the first-class accommodations that Rachel and David tried so desperately to steal. My consulting work with American Airlines has expanded to include elder abuse prevention training, and I regularly speak at industry conferences about recognizing and responding to family fraud targeting elderly travelers. Rachel and David are serving their sentences and dealing with the financial and social consequences of their choices. According to their probation officers, they spend most of their time reading about personal finance and ethical decision-making, apparently trying to understand the values they abandoned in pursuit of a lifestyle they couldn't afford. I don't visit them, and I don't respond to the letters they occasionally send asking for forgiveness and financial assistance with their legal fees. Some betrayals are too fundamental to overcome, and attempted fraud by your own family members is certainly one of them. But I do think about them sometimes, especially when I'm working with other elderly travelers who have experienced similar exploitation by family members. Their case has become a powerful tool for education and prevention, helping other families recognize the warning signs of financial abuse before it progresses to criminal behavior. The most important lesson I learned from this experience isn't about Rachel and David's failures. It's about the importance of recognizing that family relationships don't automatically create protection from criminal behavior. When someone chooses to commit fraud, they must face appropriate consequences, regardless of their family connections or personal circumstances. Rachel and David learned, too late, that underestimating someone based on age and family relationships can be a fatal mistake. They thought they were targeting a vulnerable elderly woman who would be easy to manipulate and unlikely to seek justice. Instead, they targeted someone who had spent decades learning exactly how to ensure that fraud attempts are documented, prosecuted, and used to protect other potential victims. The airport confrontation they planned as my humiliation became instead their complete destruction, serving as permanent proof that some mistakes cost more than you can ever afford to pay, and that integrity isn't just a nice ideal, it's a practical necessity for anyone who wants to build a life worth living. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.